Why do people avoid the decisions that matter most? The longer you delay them, the more reasonable the delay starts to sound. At first, you know you're avoiding it, but then it becomes, oh, I'm just being careful, or I need more information. Maybe now just isn't the right time. And eventually that delay feels responsible, but by the end of this video, you'll understand why that happens and what to do when a decision starts feeling fuzzy instead of clear. So when a decision matters, it carries consequences, right? And when something carries consequences, it also carries the possibility of going wrong and thus giving us regret. In the early 80s, economist David Bell formalized something called regret theory. The idea is that when we make decisions, we don't just imagine the outcomes, but we also imagine the pain of being wrong. And if that anticipated regret is strong enough, it can keep your brain in limbo. So when you think, if I leave my job and it fails, or if I say this and it changes things in my relationship, or what if I commit and then I later regret it? Your brain doesn't treat that as neutral thinking. It treats it as a real threat. When I did my master's degree in Applied Neuroscience, one of the most consistent themes was this. Your brain is less concerned with being optimal and way more concerned with avoiding future pain. It wants to protect you, and it wants to make sure you're safe. So for your brain, this avoidance isn't stupidity, it is protection. It's doing its job and it's doing it well. Important decisions are rarely good versus bad. They're usually good with some cost versus good with some cost. So it's stability versus freedom, honesty against harmony, growth versus familiarity, and research on decision deferral shows that when choices involve painful trade-offs, people are more likely to postpone them. And that makes sense because you're not just choosing what you want, you're choosing which loss you're willing to tolerate. And that is such a harder question. And then you add uncertainty in the mix. In our modern world, we have a lot of it. And when outcomes are unclear, your brain has to simulate possible futures. And that's a cognitively expensive thing. And your brain is anyway a very expensive organ to run. And if it can't confidently predict safety, it often defaults to preservation, which sounds like, I'll decide later. I'll wait until I have more information. And this is also where the status quo bias comes in. Doing nothing feels less personally responsible than making a choice that might go wrong. So inaction feels safer, and that's not because it has no cost, but because the cost is hidden and it unfolds in secret. So when a decision really matters, several things stack up. Anticipated regret, trade-offs, uncertainty, identity pressure, social consequences, cognitive load, and that stacking effects create fuzziness. So the more meaningful the decision is for you personally, the more energy it takes. And the more energy it demands, the more your brain leans towards delay. And that is kind of a paradox in there because the decisions that shape your future are often the ones your nervous system resists the most. And that is not because they're wrong, but because they're so important to you. I've had decisions in my own life where, if I'm honest, I knew the direction. What I didn't know was whether I was willing to deal with the cost of choosing it. So I had to make the decision if or not to do a PhD, for example. And it would have cost me 4 more years in my life. It would have cost me a lot of money, and it would have taken me away from my family. And there was an identity shift hidden in there. If it didn't work out, it would be because I chose it. And that is a very heavy thing for me to carry. So sometimes the hardest part isn't the decision itself. It is really becoming the person who stands behind it. Am I willing to carry the consequences? Yes or no? Am I willing to move? Am I willing to pay that amount of money and everything that it involves. And yes, of course, there might be a payoff, but would it be worthwhile it for me? Or is it just my ego wanting a PhD? So what actually helps? And the solution isn't to be more decisive. If your brain is treating something as a threat, pressure will not create clarity, it will not reduce the fuzziness, but what helps is changing the decision environment. So here are 4 things that work. Number 1, separate identity from outcome. Instead of asking, what does it say about me if it goes wrong? Ask yourself, given what I know today, which option aligns most with my value? So in my PhD example, if it goes wrong, it might mean for me, I am the total academic failure. But if I ask, which option aligns with my values most right now, family and building a business matter more at the moment. So pursuing the PhD might not be the right decision at this moment for me. So you're making a grounded choice with incomplete information. And that's all anyone can. Number 2, turn ambiguity into questions like, I don't know if this will work is too vague. Break it down. So what specifically don't you know? Money, time, reactions, your capacity. Turn unknowns into answerable questions. Ambiguity is stuck. Questions give your brain something to solve. And in my case, once I calculated the financial and time cost, the decision became pretty clear. It doesn't make it easier, it wasn't for me, but it became clearer. Number 3, calculate the cost of inaction. So most people overestimate the risk of action and underestimate the risk of staying still. So ask yourself, if nothing changes for the next year, what does that cost me? Emotionally, professionally, financially, privately. Inaction feels neutral, but it's not. It's a trick. Number 4, time box it. Endless rumination doesn't improve thinking, and we've all replayed conversations in our heads for hours. It really helps. So give yourself a decision window. Gather what you need, think carefully, and then make the decision. Don't be impulsive, intentionally, and put an end date to it. This is also why I built a small tool called the Decision Environment Assessment. Most of us, we treat indecision as a personality trait or personality flaw, but more often than not, it's structural, it's the environment around us. And the assessment helps you identify what's keeping your brain in threat mode, cognitive overload, uncertainty, identity pressure, all those hidden costs. So there's a link in the description below, and it's completely free. So if there is a decision you're avoiding right now, don't assume you're incapable. It might simply mean the decision is important. And discomfort isn't always a stop signal. Sometimes it's just feedback. This week, choose one decision you've been circling around, write down the regret you're afraid of, and name the trade-offs. Turn the uncertainty into question and ask, what is this delay already costing me? That question alone can shift everything.